Tyler had grown accustomed to the struggles of poverty. His mother worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, but they barely had enough to get by. Tyler's clothes were hand-me-downs, and his backpack was held together with duct tape. Despite the difficulties, Tyler was a bright and ambitious student. He attended the local public high school, where he excelled in his studies, particularly in math and science. However, Tyler's life was made miserable by his math teacher, Mrs. Johnson. She was a stern, cold-hearted woman who seemed to take pleasure in making her students suffer. Mrs. Johnson was notorious for being unfair and biased. She would often give Tyler and his friends lower grades than they deserved, while favoring the wealthier students who were her pets. Tyler tried to avoid Mrs. Johnson as much as possible, but it was impossible. She seemed to have it out for him, and would often humiliate him in front of the class. One day, Mrs. Johnson assigned a difficult math project that was due in a week. Tyler worked tirelessly on the project, pouring all his energy into it. However, when he submitted it, Mrs. Johnson gave him a failing grade, claiming that it was subpar and lazy. Tyler was devastated. He knew he had done his best, and Mrs. Johnson's grade was unfair. He decided to confront her after class. "Mrs. Johnson, I don't understand why you gave me a failing grade," Tyler said, trying to keep his cool. "I worked really hard on that project." Mrs. Johnson sneered at him. "You're just not smart enough, Tyler. You'll never amount to anything." Tyler felt a surge of anger, but he didn't back down. "That's not true, Mrs. Johnson. I'm a good student, and I deserve better than to be treated like this." Mrs. Johnson's expression changed from sneering to shock. No one had ever stood up to her like that before. For a moment, Tyler thought he saw a glimmer of respect in her eyes. From that day on, Mrs. Johnson's behavior towards Tyler changed. She was still strict and demanding, but she was fairer and more respectful. Tyler continued to excel in her class, and eventually earned her respect. Tyler learned a valuable lesson from his experience with Mrs. Johnson. He realized that even in the face of adversity, he had the power to stand up for himself and demand respect. He also learned that sometimes, people may behave in a certain way because they are struggling with their own issues. Mrs. Johnson's behavior towards him was not just about being wicked, it was also about her own insecurities and biases. Tyler's story spread throughout the school, inspiring others to stand up for themselves and demand respect. He proved that even the poorest and most marginalized students deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. As the days went by, Tyler noticed that Mrs. Johnson was treating him with a newfound respect. She would ask for his input on math problems, and even gave him extra credit for his excellent work. Tyler's classmates took notice of the change in Mrs. Johnson's behavior towards him. They began to see Tyler in a new light, as someone who had earned the respect of their notoriously tough teacher. One day, Mrs. Johnson asked Tyler to stay after class. She looked at him with a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Tyler, I want to apologize for the way I treated you earlier this year," she said. "I was going through a tough time in my personal life, and I took it out on you. That was unfair, and I'm truly sorry." Tyler was taken aback by Mrs. Johnson's apology. He had never seen her show vulnerability before. "It's okay, Mrs. Johnson," Tyler said. "I know we all have bad days. But I appreciate your apology." From that day on, Mrs. Johnson became a mentor to Tyler. She helped him with his math studies, and even introduced him to her colleagues in the math department. Tyler's grades continued to soar, and he began to see a future for himself in mathematics. He realized that he didn't have to be limited by his poverty or his circumstances.